Episode 181, IRONMAN Louisville with Sam Long. Welcome to the pursuit of the perfect race. I'm Coach Terry Wilson, and with each episode, I bring stories of athletes to you that share their experiences at races in order for you to learn how to have your perfect race. We will hear stories from athletes of all ages, abilities, and races of all distances. So regardless of where you fit in, there's something in it for you. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let the pursuit begin. Welcome back to the Pursuit of the Perfect Race. Today I have the pleasure to talk with my friend Sam Long about his recent podium race at IRONMAN Louisville, where he took second place on October 14th, 2018. He had a time of 7 hours, 39 minutes, and 21 seconds. Notable about this race was the swim was shortened to 0.9 miles, and it was raining all day long, literally. So welcome back to the show. Sam, I look forward to hearing about your race. Welcome back.
Yep. Great. It's going to be stellar, man.
Yeah, it was fun actually meeting you up there, man. It was fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. The race, I don't know if it was that much fun, but it was memorable.
That's for sure. So, how you been since Whistler, man?
I've been really good since Whistler. It's been a big journey, and after Whistler, I did, a 4-week training camp up in Canada, and then I actually did Ironman Mont Tremblant. And then I came back down to Boulder for a little while, and then I went down to Tucson for a few weeks to train with Ben Hoffman. So it was kind of a world tour and a big whirlwind. And then all of a sudden, next thing I knew, I was on an Ironman start line again.
Wow. That's crazy. So how's your training been since Whistler and all this fun stuff, all these camps and fun races?
Yeah, everything's been awesome. I really kicked the training into overdrive. I did an Xterra in there as well, Xterra Nationals, and I actually went up to the mountains in Crested Butte and did a week training there. But once I was down in Tucson, I was training about 40 hours a week, so
wow,
pretty full on.
How's your recovery going with all that?
The recovery's coming along okay. I'm pretty tired from the race, but everything's coming along okay. I'm definitely having to give a little more recovery than I've done in the past, but that's just life, Sometimes your body responds and comes back quicker, and other times you got to give it a few more days.
Yeah. So going into the training for Louisville, did you have key workouts that you were willing to get in to say, hey, this is like a benchmark before every Ironman that you do, or what was this like?
Yeah, I kind of would say for Louisville, I came up with what my future benchmark workouts would be.
Really?
And until then, I was still kind of figuring out what I wanted my benchmark workouts to be. But after this training block, I've got some workouts that I go, in the future, I want to hit those same sessions.
And if I remember right, you were doing like 150, 180-mile bike rides or some ungodly number before Whistler, right?
Correct, yep.
So is that what you're going to be doing for benchmark workouts, or you got something else in mind?
That's not necessarily what I'd call a benchmark workout. That's definitely workouts that I will always continue to do, but I don't always track my watts in those numbers. I always keep track of them, but I'll do different intervals in those workouts, and sometimes it's just aerobic. For me, 160-mile day is actually a pretty routine day on the bike. So I set those up in a whole number of ways. I might work VO2, or I might work threshold, or I might just ride zone 2 the whole day. But really the main benchmark workout I came up with, which I did on Friday, not 2 days before, but like 9 or 10 days before the race. And it's a 4K test Ironman swim. This was in yards, so it's essentially 3.8K meters. And then you try and get on the bike as quick as you can. And I did 3.5 hours at Ironman pace. And then I stopped at a quick gas station break, and I had a Coke, and then I did a 30-minute maximal time trial.
On the bike or the run?
On the bike, yeah. So that got me right up to 102 miles on the bike. And for me, it was right about 4 hours and 5 minutes on the bike, which is a little shorter than most of my Ironman rides are, but not by much. And then I did a 10-mile runoff tempo, and for that I ran 6-minute miles.
Wow. So how did you feel after that 10-mile run?
I actually felt like I could have kept running quite a bit more.
Wow.
And because I did that session, and I went into the session actually fairly well recovered. Well, nowhere near as recovered as I was the next week for the actual race, but I did take a day of recovery before. So I was going, okay, if I can do that, then all I got to do on race day is another 16 miles. And I felt like that was a very feasible and reasonable thing to do.
Wow. So with this big workout, being that this is on a Friday, right?
Yeah.
So how was your weekend? Was that a weekend spent recovering? What was that?
Yeah, so I set it up because, right, the usual, like, Ironman training, any triathlete training weekend is you ride long on Saturday, usually with a brick run off, and then you run long on Sunday. And when you do that, you stack 2 days of hard work, which isn't a bad idea. Usually I like that, and that's how I also usually train. But just since I was a week out, I wanted to be more fresh for each of my hard days and then making sure I'm getting more recovery. So Saturday was then, I still had a solid swim, but that was it. So that way I was actually able to recover. And then Sunday, I did my last good hard long run.
So what was the long run?
The long run was, it was 14 miles. The workout was 2 mile warm up and then a mile on, a mile off 4 times. And the on miles were done at 5:30 pace. And the off miles were done at about 6:40, 6:45 pace. And then you went right into 4 times 2 minutes, essentially pretty much full gas. Those were done at 4:45 pace per mile. And then 2 minutes, very slow jog. Those were done at about 8:30 pace per mile. And then a 1 mile warm down.
Wow. That's crazy. So that was done literally 1 week to the day 8 days out from the race.
Yep, correct.
Okay. Man. So then you start traveling to the race.
Yep, pretty much.
So how did you get to Louisville?
Well, this time I flew. I sure as heck did not mess around with driving or doing anything like that. I got a direct flight, a super easy flight from DIA to Louisville. I flew out on Thursday of race week. Actually, yeah, on Thursday.
Okay. And then, so you got there in time for the pro panel.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, it was nice to be able to see you up on the panel actually giving some tips to folks. It's pretty cool.
I know, kind of wild.
Yeah. So they asked some pretty cool questions up at the pro panel about what the thoughts were on the new system of getting to Kona. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question, especially after I got second place, right? I just missed out on a Kona spot. So I think overall it's probably an improvement, but it's going to be hard to say how everything's going to play out. I mean, if we look at how Kona played out this year, as of right now, Sebastian Kienle, who had a DNF, and Lionel Sanders, who had a very poor race, both of those guys have to go and qualify, and they're both 2 of the best athletes in the whole sport. So essentially wherever they go, it's likely no one else at that race gets a spot. And it makes it really strategic which races you choose. And I think that makes things a little bit complicated. But not complicated, but it just makes it that I think we'll see some athletes pulling out of races and picking other races and trying to cherry pick races. And I don't think that's going to be a good strategy. I think the real strategy is you have to pick a race and you have to say, I'm going to train hard enough and be good enough to win the race regardless of who shows up.
Right, and then you have races like at Mont Tremblant where Cody Bills would win and get his top 4 Kona, but then not take it because he says that he doesn't want to do that yet. So how would that work?
Then that would go to second place, right?
So it would roll.
Yeah, so it'll roll down, and that's where things I think get really complicated. Or say, like if Lionel Sanders is say someone's at Mont Tremblant next year and they already have a spot and they win, and then say Cody Beals gets second, it would actually roll down to third place if Cody Beals said, no, I don't want the spot. So in that way, you could actually be at a race and theoretically get a spot maybe with anything as good as 4th or 5th, depending on the race. I think that's a stretch. I think 5th place would be a big stretch. Or you show up at a race like Louisville and you have a very outstanding performance for me, and one guy takes the spot, so second's not good enough. So But I think you go to Kona, and almost everyone who's at Kona next year will deserve to be there.
Right. So how will it work with some races being men and some races being women pros? Is that going to be equal? How does that work?
So, like at Louisville, they offered one spot for males and one spot for females.
Right.
I think when the race is just a male pro race, it'll just be one spot for males.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. But then if they don't have the same number of races for females, then they're at a disadvantage in the same way with males.
No, they do. They've made sure that there's the same number of races where it's, if there's a male-only race, there's a complimentary female-only race.
Well, does that mean technically that there's going to be the same number of males and females at Kona?
Theoretically. So they've created one other complication to this is they have, I think they call them allotment slots or something. Allotment slots. And so at some races, which they didn't have this at Louisville, but at some races they'll go, there's one spot for the male winner for the males and one spot for females, and we allocate 2 spots, which means there's 4 total spots, and they decide who the slots are allocated to based on how competitive they deem the men's and women's field to be. So if the females field is far more competitive, I suppose they'd give both of those slots to the females, while if the males field is more competitive, both slots would go to the males, or if they're even, then one would go to each. And that's going to be complicated. How do you really decide that, right?
Yeah, it's very subjective. Like somebody can be, whoever is the person in charge of that can make it very subjective in what they think is competitive.
Yeah, and I haven't heard of their system of how they're going to try and make it objective rather than subjective. But I think no matter what you do, there's going to be subjectivity in that.
Right. Unless it's like, hey, here's a rubric of what this is like, and this many minutes or this many seconds behind this number of many people. That's how it is. I don't know. But, man, it's going to be an interesting year next year, and you're the first pro who have actually talked about that, so it's kind of interesting to see how all that worked out, because even at this race, I had Adam Ottstad I was following, Adam Fye, I think that's how you say his last name, Adam Fye. I interviewed both of those athletes, and both of them DNF'd, and then I also entered Amy Von Tassel, she DNF'd, and a few other female pros I was following also DNF'd. So how would that work with a large number of DNFs on the pro side? Because I think if they're not going to have a solid day, they're just going to bag it and go to the next race without the taxing fitness of a race under the belt.
Completely, I think that's the big concern. For me, that's the big concern, is that your day starts going south, and you've got your name on all the start lists, so that if your day goes south here, you can pull the pin and go and race next weekend, and hopefully your day doesn't go south then. So I think we'll see people doing that, and I think that's maybe unfortunate. But as with any system, you gotta play within the rules and use the rules to get the results you want. And if your result is that you want to get to Kona, you're going to do what you need to do within the rules to get there, right?
Yeah, is that your goal next year, is to get to Kona?
It's a goal, yeah. It's maybe not the main goal, but it's a goal.
Okay. So going into this race, once you got there and you're on the pro panel afterwards, how was the check-in process for you at Louisville? I know the village is there on the grass and all that fun stuff. So the weather was actually kind of nice the day before.
Yeah, the day before was pretty nice. The morning I know was quite cold, but by about 9 a.m. it was pretty warm, and I didn't check in my bike or my run shoes or anything the day before. I just brought everything on race day.
Yeah, so you were lucky, because it had rained overnight, and a lot of folks had gotten their bags all wet and stuff if they didn't put Ziploc bags and stuff in them.
Yeah, oh yeah, I was lucky I didn't have to bring my stuff there the day before.
Yeah. So the day before the race, what kind of nutrition are you trying to get in?
Lots of carbs, man. Lots of carbs.
Did you make it to Wild Eggs?
Nope, did not make it to Wild Eggs.
Oh,
Usually the day before, I usually just eat at my house. I just don't like to. I like to be in control of all the ingredients, and I go gluten-free, which I know we talked about at Whistler for the day before. And so I had a few rice and chicken meals, rice and eggs. I had gluten-free pasta that night with some red meat sauce and plenty of water the whole day. And to be honest, I actually had a good bit of chocolate the day before as well.
Okay. So with this, did you get an Airbnb, or did they give you a room stay, home stay, whatever?
Yeah, I had a homestay.
Nice. So that way you didn't have to worry about getting a rental car or anything like that then?
Yeah, it was totally awesome. My homestay hosts were absolutely phenomenal.
Wow. So whenever you actually got to go to bed the night before the race, how were you laying out all your gear to make sure you had what you would need for the weather? Because originally this was going to be a solid, nice day, 10 days out on the forecast, and then things started going south the closer and closer we got to the race.
Yeah, so Terry, let me tell you, a few years ago, I went and I had this experience at 70.3 St. George. It was a few years ago. The weather ended up being really terrible and rainy and cold there, and St. George is in the desert, so it's usually quite warm. And I went down there, and I brought nothing but my speed suit. No arm warmers, no jacket, absolutely nothing except for a speed suit.
Was this before you went pro?
Yeah, this was my last race as an age grouper, in fact.
Oh, wow.
And I go down there, and even a few days out, it said race day was going to be nice. And then next thing you know, like 24 hours before the race, it's saying, it's not even 24 hours, but it's saying there's cause for a storm. And then you wake up in the morning, and it's going, a storm is coming in. And at that point, it's 5 a.m. There's no way I'm getting anything. And all I did, I went and I raced in the speed suit. And I've almost never been so cold before in my life on a bike. And thank God it was a 70.3, because for a 70.3, for 2 hours on the bike, you can get away with almost anything, and you can be real cold. But I knew, like, if I had to be that cold again for 4.5 hours, that I would not finish the race. And so ever since that experience at St. George, on my pack list, which I've got a bulleted list just to make sure I don't ever forget anything, I've got warm clothes, and this time, usually that's just like I'll bring arm warmers and like a tight fitting jacket. That's usually enough. And then certainly tights for the morning. But I saw the weather a little bit in this time of year, and I only brought one carry-on, and I tell you, about half that carry-on was warm clothes, so that I could have any option I could imagine on race day, given the conditions.
Wow. So what year was this St. George race?
Oh, it would have been 2015.
Wow.
Maybe 2016.
Because it's funny that you mentioned that, because I actually had a guy named George Cespedes from Boulder that has the Tri-Animals team. He did the same thing at that same race, I have a feeling, and he got caught with his pants down, so to speak, with the cold weather, and he said never again. And he literally brings cold weather gear to every single race because of that.
Yeah, you just never know what can happen. And so thankfully then, even you might remember, is at Louisville, the weather forecast changed between Saturday night and Sunday morning.
Yes.
Big time. It changed big time, because it was only supposed to originally rain on Saturday. It was telling us it was only going to rain till about 9 a.m.
And it was going to be fine. It was going to be sunny-ish.
Yeah, sunny-ish. It was going to be only a 40% chance of rain till 9 a.m. And then it was just going to be, the sun was going to be peeking through the clouds. And then, you wake up on race morning and you go out there and you're basically realizing it's going to rain the whole day. And so what I did is, I knew I wanted to be warm anyways, but especially on that race morning, I'm going to put booties on the bike so that my feet can be warm. And I'm going to put on a full rain jacket.
So like a booties on the bike ride?
Yeah. Yep. Full on booties on your feet, and then like a tight fitting thermal rain jacket.
Wow.
And that's what I put on. And I think you remember because you were standing right in transition when I came through.
Yeah.
And remember how I then put my booties on, and about 10 other pros got out of transition before me. And
I was like, hey, my mental thought was, what you're doing right now might take a few extra seconds, but the seconds that you're going to be saving down the road is going to pay dividends in greater amounts of time because you're going to be a lot more comfortable and warmer.
Exactly. And yeah, I lost time there, but I had the fastest bike split by 9 minutes. So it must have been worth something to take that extra time to put on the booties and the thermal jacket.
Yeah. Now, I know you didn't race in the sports bra like you did at Whistler and all that. What did you have for the run?
The run, I knew by the run that I'd be warm enough. And had it been too cold, I would have just kept the thermal jacket on if I had been really freezing. But once I came into transition, I could kind of tell I'd be warm enough running just in my regular speed suit. So I took that off and I ditched the gloves. I wore gloves on the bike too. I forgot to mention that. And then I just ran in the speed suit.
Okay. So what time did you, sorry to back up a little bit. What time did you actually go into bed on the day before the race?
I knew you were going to ask that question. And you're not going to like my answer. So it was Kona footage, right? So I had to watch Kona. And then after watching such amazing performances, and I believe it ended at about 8:30 at night in Louisville since we were 6 hours later than Kona. And I was so hyped up from watching the Kona footage and then so hyped up from my own race, I didn't fall asleep until 12:45 or 1 in the morning.
So you got it so late. What time did you actually get up?
Oh, I was up at 5.
Wow.
So 4 hours of sleep essentially.
And this was before you even knew the swim was delayed.
Correct. Yeah. The funny thing is, though, I'll tell you 2 other things. Is my body was like anticipating it being a cold day. I swear to God, because I was actually in bed by 9:30 and I laid in bed for 3 hours and like my metabolism got so hot that I was like sweating in my room, just in my bed. And I had to get fully undressed and take all the covers off. And I turned the fan on high and I opened the windows wide open. And still for 2 hours I was sweating.
God.
And it was like my body knew things were going to get cold tomorrow and I need to be generating heat. And then at 12:30 at night, I went in and I took a shower and turned the water on as cold as I could get. And I stood in the freezing water for 5 minutes. And then I came out and I got in bed and I fell right asleep because then I was, the right temperature. Yeah.
Gosh, I mean, when I sleep, I have to have I know this is going to sound crazy, but I have to have a foot outside the covers to my generating the coolness. I have to have that little regulation in there.
Yeah, we've got things like that. And then I woke up 4 times during the night, so I only slept 45 minutes every time, and then I'd wake up and have to go pee. And I woke up at 4. One of the times I woke up at 4, and I could hear the rain just coming down. And at that moment, I kind of went, oh, this swim's going to be delayed. I just knew in my head that the swim was going to be delayed. And of course, it wasn't the type of thing where I was going to go, oh, I'll sleep an extra 30 or 45 minutes. But it's weird. I just had this, supervision of predicting the future. My body predicted it was going to be crazy cold and generated all this heat. And then I predicted the swim start would be late. And so it was kind of a cool day for that stuff. And I guess I lost some sleep over it, but for me, it was worth it.
Yeah. So what time did you get out of bed? 5?
Yeah. I think my alarm went off at 5:12 to be precise.
Okay. So what did you have for breakfast before you left?
I had crepes.
Gosh. So you have crepes and then you get everything ready to head down to transition with your bike, with everything, right?
Yep.
So I was already in transition for probably an hour before you showed up, getting all nice and wet. So you strode in about 6 o'clock or so, I think.
Yeah, I was certainly the last pro in transition, without a doubt.
Yes.
By about 30 minutes, I think.
Because I was sitting there helping out, like I was assigned all the pros to help them out, and if they needed anything, I just had my pump walking back and forth on the little line there, and then I was helping Cedric King out. And I was like, man, I'm tracking Sam, Adam, I'm drawing a blank on,
Amy,
yep, and Aaron and a few other pros, and I was like, wow, Sam's not showing up. I guess he isn't racing. And then by the time you showed up, so after you get done with setting up your transition area, dropping your bags off, you get down to the swim start, which is about a mile away. It's about a mile walk. You get down there. What is the atmosphere down there? I know you're already in the rain, already kind of wet and cold. What is it like down there at the swim start? I did not go down there, so I don't know.
Pretty similar to any Ironman I've done. At that moment, the air is so tense, not because people are angry at each other, but just because everyone's so nervous about the day ahead. You wouldn't even know it was raining because everyone's oblivious to that at that point. You know, everyone's thinking about their day, and you can just feel the energy. It's palpable. I mean, you can reach out and touch the energy, and I love feeling that energy at any Ironman start. It just gets me so hyped up and so focused. And I mean, if you really want to capture the spirit of an Ironman, I actually think going to the start of a swim is better than going to the finish line.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, they're very different, you know, but because at the finish line, it's them accomplishing it, and it's this joyful spirit. At the swim, it's like it's before anything's even gone off. And as soon as that gun goes off, it's like you're going to battle. But right before that gun goes off, man, it is just... the energy is just crazy. It gives me the jitters even just thinking about it.
So I don't know if you saw it, but Nike actually had a commercial. It was like a 30-second ad or so that I actually shared on Facebook, and it's capturing the moment of a marathon start line, and it has all these faces, and they're all looking like zombies in a sense, just like, oh my gosh, what's about to happen? What's about to happen? And then it has like the gun going off, and then it just all goes away. It's pretty cool.
Exactly.
That's the same way. So I know at 7:20 or so, I know I went down to the water and I looked down there and I was like, yeah, it's going to be delayed. And like, it like you could see like it was just not safe. Like, obviously it wasn't going to be safe to go upstream. And then I started looking at the river current, and like you could see just logs floating by really quick. I was like, oh man, this ain't cool. And then it was probably about another 5 minutes or so before I realized that the swim was going to be delayed on my end, which was going to create an issue if they didn't trickle people into the swim, because of a shorter swim and less time to swim was going to create a big congestion in transition, and there was only so many people we could have in the tent at one time. And 2,500 people in a matter of 30 minutes, well, that's going to be a really big roadblock. And I think they did a good job at trickling people in, but before that, whenever they delayed the swim, it's just like Mont Tremblant, because you were there, and that delay was an hour in 15-minute increments.
Yep.
So how was it here? Was it a 15-minute increment, or was it a straight delay of 30 minutes?
Because the male pro started at 8.
Yes.
Is that correct? It was just straight 30 minutes. They told us we're starting at 8, and that's much preferred over 15 minutes, because at Mont Tremblant, you know, every 15 minutes they tell us it's another 15 minutes, so you're still like sitting there trying to still stay warmed up. Like when they're like, oh, it's 30 minutes, like I knew I had, 15 minutes just to totally chill and stay rested, and then I basically had 15 minutes to try and warm up again. While at Mont Tremblant, I essentially warmed up every 15 minutes 5 times.
Wow. So here, what were you doing as a warm-up to kind of get your blood pumping a little bit?
Mostly, I mean, I kind of just got the arm swinging a little bit, and because at this point I had already dropped my shoes off, so it's not like I could go for another warm-up jog. So just really, yes, I did some downward dog, a few yoga poses, and just really some breathing exercises to get that, and then I hopped in the water.
So here at the swim start, you're 6'4", and here you are doing some yoga poses.
Correct. Yep. I think people are always like, "Wow, that's one way to warm up."
So you didn't have a beer before the start, did you?
No beer before the start. I tell you what, Terry, you'll never believe me, but I actually, in the whole month before the race, I only had three beers in a whole month.
So some of those stories on your Instagram must be superstitious, huh?
Superstitious. Well, and then you might, as soon as I finished, I think I had about enough beer to make up for the whole month. So,
everybody, I just want to say thank you for listening to the podcast. And I just want to let you know that I've enjoyed having so many people on this show, and I couldn't really do it without your support. Thank you so much for tuning in, listening, and being a part of what I'm doing. If you would,
I was not.
Moments to leave me a review over on iTunes.
Yeah, 7.
It would help me out tremendously. And enjoy the show. Okay, so you were in T1 for 3:45, and that's with putting the booty zone, which took probably 15, 20 seconds. And how does the swim and T1 go for you? What is it like for you going through this?
Yeah, it was a little bit more chaotic than usual.
Really?
And I think that's only because we were all essentially competing in the transition. I mean, if you think about it, right, you said my T1 was 3:45 and my swim time was 12 minutes. Well, as a percentage, that means my T1 time was 33% of my swim time, right? Like in a usual Ironman, if you swim, let's say, an hour, and even if you spend 5 minutes in transition, as a percentage, that's still a lot less. And so I think we all just knew that we had to really be on it, but still try and take care of everything. And as you said, be comfortable. And I think I leaned farther towards the side of being comfortable and really being prepared for a warm bike ride, as opposed to being really quick. And I think the other pros actually, and maybe they would disagree with me, but I think they went a little more to the side of being quick, as opposed to taking the time to put on all the maybe necessary or not necessary layers, depending how you think about it.
Right. So what was the swim start like there? Because I know you jump off a dock, but instead of heading right to go upstream, you're going left, and you're already in the water going downstream. What was that like up there?
Well, the pros, they didn't have us start by jumping off the dock. They had us start in the water. We didn't have to jump off a dock and then turn. We just essentially started swimming right straight down.
Okay. Now, the guy that ended up winning, Chris, he actually went 2 seconds faster than you on the swim, but that really didn't make or break the race at all because you definitely overpowered him on the bike. Excuse me. Now, whenever you got in the water there, it's really muddy, murky water from what I could tell. I didn't swim in it, but it looked really brown, and it didn't look like anything I wanted to swim in. And this is the Ohio River, and it's not really the cleanest body of water that's out there, I don't think. But how was it for you?
Oh, to tell you the truth, I thought it was pretty awesome. You know the book Tom Sawyer?
Yeah.
And the guy, he makes a raft with some of his buddies, and they float down the Mississippi. I know it's the Mississippi and not the Ohio River, but they have this great big adventure floating down the Mississippi River. And so honestly, I just tried to think of myself as Tom Sawyer, and I'm just floating down the Ohio River and making a big adventure out of it. And as soon as I thought about it like that, it totally changed my perception, and I was able to have a fun time with it.
Wow. So were y'all all able to stay in a pack? Was the current strong? Could you feel
the current was real strong. I mean, my average swim time per 100 was 54 seconds, and what I will tell you is that I've never swam under a minute for 100 in my life before. So it was a crazy dynamic, and yeah, we broke apart a little bit. We broke apart into several groups, I'd say, and we had to take this kind of sharp right turn for about 100 meters, and that was really a crazy part of the race because, you know, you were worried that you'd get blown past the buoy, and if you're blown past the buoy, are you technically disqualified? And I think we all made it to that buoy, but I do know I talked to some age groupers after, and I was telling them about that crazy turn, and they go, what crazy turn? I just kept going straight. And so I think what a lot of people ended up doing in that race is they didn't even see that buoy off to the right, and then they just went straight, which would actually make it like another 300 meters shorter, I think.
Wow. So did they technically get disqualified, or being that it's a shorter swim, does it matter? I mean,
they didn't get to.
I mean, being a pro, would they hold you to a different standard than the age groupers?
I think they'd hold us to a different standard. And even honestly, if a pro had missed that, I think nothing would have happened. I mean, on the day, it was crazy, and it was something to have us take this super sharp right. I think given the day with this swim that nobody would get DQ'd. Maybe a pro would, but certainly not an age grouper. And certainly I think it was mostly just a problem with the course. I mean, they reset all the buoys in the 30 minutes, and nothing against the race organizers either. I mean, it was hectic, but that crazy right turn, you wouldn't even know to see it, and nobody's seen a course map of where to go, and you're going to assume it's a straight shot. And if you just kept going straight, you would essentially just miss one buoy, and then you'd be right back on course, I'm pretty sure. So given the day, it really wouldn't matter. And I mean, maybe a few people missed it, but I think most people still managed to go swim the buoy. And I don't think anybody intentionally avoided that buoy. I think it was just the type of thing that you would have happened by accident. And I think a lot of people in their head, they probably had the thought, like, what happens if I get off course here and next thing I know I'm 5 miles down the Ohio River? I know I had that thought. I was like, make sure not to lose the group. And I've never had so much motivation to stay so close to the front kayak because I went, if I lose this front kayak, I might have no clue where I am, and I might end up in a different state.
Literally, because like the current there, saying it's strong is an understatement, I feel like.
Oh yeah, there were nearly rapids forming, I think.
Yes, and I went to the volunteer banquet the day after the race, and Eric, the race director, actually said that setting up the new course in under 25 minutes and making the call, playing the audible, was probably the safest thing to do, and setting it up quickly with all the volunteers in the water was crazy. And he couldn't have done it without the support of all the volunteers on the water. That was remarkable.
Completely, man. Like, when I say, like, oh, that buoy's a little out of place, I am passing zero judgment because I honestly think that they could not have done a better job. I mean, minus that one little detail, that the fact that they did that in 20 minutes or 25 minutes, to me, is completely remarkable. And then all of the kayakers out there just did a completely class act job. I mean, they were so on it, and they were watching the perimeter. And let me mention that they're not just sitting there still to watch the perimeter. They're actually having to paddle upstream to stay right at the perimeter, right?
So it's like they're on a treadmill in the water.
Yeah, exactly. A treadmill in the water, and they're trying to stay in the same place. And so I really think they all did just a phenomenal job.
Wow. So you get out of the water here. You go. There's some stairs there to get out of the water. Then you go up the boat ramp there. It's like a boat ramp, I say, but it's just like this long ramp here. And then you go around and then to your bag and in the tent, out of the tent, up to your bike, get your bike, put on your booties, and then go out. And it's a really long walkway to go out to the mountain line. How was this process for you?
Well, the process went fine in the moment. And this is the only time I've ever done an Ironman where I've had my shoes on, because I had to put my shoes on by my bike in order to have my booties on. So I'm running in my, road shoes, which don't have the best grip, to say the least. And anyways, it goes fine. But then I get on the bike and I realize having to run this quarter mile or whatever has undone my booties.
So how did you fix that?
Well, I couldn't really fix it. By undone, I don't mean like they fell off, but there's most booties, they've got a zipper in the back that you do up like your Achilles, and that had come all the way down. And really the only way to zip these up is with two hands, right? Is you got to grab the bottom and hold it in place, and then you bring the zipper up with the other hand. And that would be a very hard feat to do, to bend down with both hands while on a bicycle.
Okay. So
now, I thought about trying it, and then I tried to do it with one hand, but it just couldn't work. So what I ended up doing was just shoving, because it's still covering most of my foot. It's just the back now. And the main concern was actually this thing was filling out and catching all this air, and, it could maybe get stuck in my chain or something. And so what I ended up doing is I just tucked the tops of the booties into like my shoes and my socks so that it just stayed tight, even though it wasn't zipped up.
Okay. Now, did you wear a beanie underneath your helmet?
Nope, no beanie.
No beanie? And you only had just regular bike gloves on?
No, I had full sleeves, like winter gloves on.
Okay. Now, knowing that this is going to be a cold, wet bike ride, and you really only had literally like maybe at most 4 hours tops to prepare for this mentally, how did you embark on this bike ride? Because this is going to be a mental beatdown.
Yeah, the mentality was probably the key thing in approaching this bike ride in the correct fashion. And again, I'll say that actually I think I had a benefit because I was up till 1 a.m. I had a lot of time to think about how I was going to approach the bike, because by that time I knew that the conditions weren't going to be too great. And I pretty much told myself I was not going to let one negative thought come into my mind the entire day.
Really?
Yep. And of course a negative thought will come, but that I wasn't going to let a negative thought stew in my mind. And so anything about the weather or anything like that, I wasn't even going to let myself think about.
So
once I was,
what's that process like for you? How do you take that negative thought and say, okay, that's a negative thought, get rid of that? How do you do that?
So I pretty much tried to turn it around into a thing of positivity. And the best way I could do that was by saying, well, I did a couple things. One, I modified my nutrition plan, and I told myself the only way I was going to be able to stay positive in such a day was to eat chocolate bars. So you better believe it. I ate chocolate bars on the bike to stay positive.
So you have gloves on. How are you eating chocolate bars? Well,
I actually didn't put the gloves on the first 30 minutes, and I ate chocolate bars the first 30 minutes of the bike. I forgot to put on the gloves because I was so excited and so looking forward to eating these chocolate bars.
That's hilarious. So, are you going to be sponsored by Hershey's next season?
We'll see, The application is open.
That is awesome. So, you eat chocolate bars for the first 30 minutes to get into a positive mindset for this hellish of a ride to come up, where you bike. Yep. You will end up biking less than 4.5 hours here to have the best bike split of the day. But there's hills on this bike course. There's wet, rainy conditions. There's tight cornering in some parts. And it's like a lollipop here. So to get out to the lollipop itself, you got to go up the stick here. How was the road quality? How was all this going for you at this time?
The road quality on that first stick to get to the lollipop is pretty poor, I would say. For U.S. roads, I mean, if you go ride in New Zealand, you'd be going, oh, this is a great road. But for the U.S., I mean, it's not terrible, but I mean, there's a lot of bumps in the road. There's potholes to look out for. We had to cross railroad tracks at some point. And you're all doing this in the wet, crazy rain. So it was definitely a heads up kind of moment, and you had to be on it with the bike handling. And for me, like, that was one way I was able to turn that into a positive, because I'm a big mountain biker, and I think my bike handling skills are pretty well, that I kind of went, oh, this, like, compared to my competitors, I am going to be able to do better than them.
Really?
And whether that's true or not doesn't really matter. What's true is that I thought that in my head, and that gave me confidence in the day.
And you believed it, because if you have that even false confidence, it's been proven that it will actually give you more confidence, because the whole fake it till you make it is a real thing that is scientifically backed.
Completely.
So with that, I mean, having a little bit lower PSI, like we talked about before we hopped on here, to 95 to 97, gives you a little bit more grip on the road. You're still using the disc with the 50 millimeter on the back, and that's going to give you a little bit better overall grip. And if you're staying in aero, you're not going to be out there as long because you're tucked in, and that's going to reserve a little bit of heat. But did you find that having the speed that you were was actually making you colder? Because the faster you go in the cold weather, the colder you're going to be.
Yeah, I think so. And this was something I had to find sort of a happy medium within because, race pace is pretty quick. And what I found is that when you were at like your low end of race pace, you're still going quite fast, but you're not generating all that much heat. So you're freezing cold. And that's how I rode the first 30 miles. I was with a group of 8 guys. We're not drafting, but we're all in a group, 12 meters apart, and that was at the very low end of what I would consider my Ironman pace. I actually thought it was so ridiculously easy that it felt like I was on a recovery ride, but I was freezing cold, but we're still going 20-something miles an hour. And at that point, I got this violent shivering, and I like my whole body was shivering and uncontrollably, and I couldn't really, my breathing, how you get this weird breathing pattern when you're really cold? I can't really explain it, but
it's like you're almost crying because you can't like catch your breath, and it's like
exactly, yep. These like really shallow breaths, and then I mean my bike, my handlebars are like moving because I'm shivering uncontrollably, and in that moment, that was probably the most decisive moment of the race for me. I went, if I don't make a move and ride harder on this bike course, I am going to not finish the race.
Really?
Yeah, and I was at the back of 8. I was at the back of 9 guys, so 8 guys were in front of me, and all of a sudden, in one fell swoop, I pass all 8 guys, and then I'm on my own for the whole rest of the bike ride.
About what mile marker was that?
This was about mile 35.
Oh, wow. So you took charge of the race at mile 35, knowing that you still had 85 miles left.
Correct, yeah. But to be honest, I wasn't really thinking – in that moment, I was not really thinking about the next 85 miles. What I was thinking about was if I don't generate some heat, I'm going to be on the side of the road waiting to get picked up by a warm car in 10 minutes.
Wow. So it wasn't necessarily a matter of race tactics. It was a matter of you staying warm to keep going.
No, in fact, it was the opposite of race tactics because I could not have been happier, and I would have loved to have just sat in the back of that group for the entire bike ride. And as I said, it felt so easy to me. I'm pretty sure I would have been able to run under 240 had I sat in that group. But it wouldn't have mattered because I never would have even made it to the run.
Wow. So at any point along the way, did you feel like, I can just pull the cord right now and be warm in a matter of 20 minutes if I just pull the cord, but instead I have to be out here in the cold weather?
No, the thought never once crossed my mind because remember how I told you I wasn't going to let myself think about the cold weather.
Right. So I was trying to trick you there to see if you held to it here.
Yeah, no, the thought never even crossed my mind, not for a second. The only thought at times was, like, in that moment was, how can I, like, I'm shivering uncontrollably, but it wasn't like I was like, oh, like, I wasn't upset about it. It was just, how do I get warm? And that was the only thought process. It's not like, this sucks, I'm shivering uncontrollably. It was just, oh, wow, I feel kind of cold. I better warm up a little bit. And to me, the only option was to ride harder. The thought of stopping or warming up, literally, I mean, that would have been as alien as hopping on a spaceship at that moment.
Wow. So as far as the bike ride goes, in these really poor conditions, what advice would you have to give to somebody that is biking in these conditions for the first time and in a race?
Ooh, that's a good question. The best thing I could say is you want to keep as much surface contact with the tires on the road at all times. And so all that really means, that's kind of technical jargon, but you want to keep traction on the road at all times. And this is no different than if you're biking or driving a car in wet conditions. And most people have driven a car in wet conditions. Is you want to always, brake before the turn, and you actually almost want to push your body like down into the ground on turns, because that actually puts more weight into your tires. And I mean, at some point we'd have to get into all the physics of this, but if there's more weight pushing into the ground, it's less likely that you're going to slide off.
Right. And that makes sense, and that's why I rode a little bit lower PSI too. Exactly. That was basically, besides the bumpy roads and the fact that it was wet, is why I rode a lower PSI. Okay. Now, with this course, you also consumed a little bit more calories at 500 or so per hour, rather than riding at 450 calories per hour like Whistler. So, yep. Was there a reason for the bump in calories? Physiologically, I wouldn't say there was as much of a reason. It kind of just ended up being that way. I mean, when you eat a few chocolate bars... Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you were able to learn something from today's episode. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to leave a review on iTunes or share it with a friend. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to see pictures from this athlete's race, learn more about who I am, what I'm doing, or be on the show yourself to share your story, check out my website at CoachTerryWilson.com. Until next time, continue the pursuit. Once I hit about mile 50, my gloves are completely soaked through. Your hands, even with gloves on, are slightly cold, and everything's so wet. I mean, the volunteers' hands are wet, the bottles are wet, your hands are wet, your gloves are wet, everything's cold. So it became really difficult to grab stuff at aid stations. So you probably had to slow down quite a bit just to grab water. Yeah, and I slowed down, I'd say, the most I've ever slowed down at aid stations. And there were still a few aid stations where I grabbed stuff, but it all just popped out, and it was impossible just because of how wet everything was. And I totally dropped my special needs bag, and because it was in a wet plastic slippery bag. And the problem was, when it's that wet out, to do a full U-turn takes a while, And doing a U-turn at special needs is a big no-no for anybody, because that puts you, the volunteers, and other athletes in jeopardy. Precisely, especially when it's a 2-loop lollipop thing, right? Because I'm coming through on my second loop, and there were probably 50 people around me on their first loop. So once I dropped it, I just went, on this instance, I'm not getting it. And in a hot race, I'd be concerned, because in a hot race, my nutrition needs are really a lot more. I worry a lot more about cramping and getting enough sodium in. But as you can probably tell, when it's cold, I'm eating chocolate bars, so I'm not really too concerned about where the calories come from. So frankly, I didn't even really worry about it. I had stuffed for this race in that tight windbreaker jacket I put on right away. I had all the chocolate bars and a whole bunch of food already in that. So I knew that, okay, if I drop stuff at aid stations, like, it's not the end of the world. I've got stuff already in my pockets. Okay. Now, I know you had something a little bit different on your bike this time around as far as your chain goes. Tell me about this. Yeah, so I've started working with this company called First Endurance, and they make this chain that has significantly reduced friction over other chains. And the science says you save about 3 to 6 watts, and it's pretty big, and it just makes your shifting so smooth. And every time I put one of those new chains on, it's almost a mental thing just as much. I just feel like I'm going to ride faster, and therefore I do. And so I've really enjoyed working with them and using their chains, and I've used those. I used that at Mont Tremblant actually as well. Wow. So how do people go about getting an ice friction chain? You can just go right up on their website, icefriction.com, I believe is the website, and you can order them, and they'll ship them right to your house. Nice. So is it like wax-based? Yeah, I think it's basically like this white stuff that's appeared on it, and I should be more, I guess, conversed on the science of the exact terminology. I've always gotten a little bit confused of wax-based versus Teflon-based and all that stuff, and
And I know it's a 2-part series, but you'll have to pardon me that I can't remember exactly what the 2 parts are. But I know they basically clean and strip the chain, and they put, I want to say it's like a Teflon first, and then they put this powder stuff on top at the end. Okay.
So did it work pretty good for you with these rainy conditions?
Yeah, to be honest, I thought, like, when I came out in the morning to transition, I went, oh, there was really no point in putting that chain on because it's all going to evaporate in the rain. And then when I went and picked up my bike from transition after the race, it was still on there.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yep, it was crazy. And so I went, okay, even in the rain, these work great.
Great. Now, whenever you start getting a little bit further in on the bike at miles, say, 80, 90, and 100, you know that you probably have a pretty decent lead on people, right?
I didn't think it was anywhere close to as big as it was.
Oh, wow. So you didn't realize that you had a nearly 10-minute gap on second place at that time?
No, not at all. I thought they were maybe a minute behind.
Wow.
Yeah. I thought I wasn't really riding that well, to be honest with you.
Did you have like a goal as far as watts go, or did you even care about watts?
Yeah, I had a goal before I went into the thing, but like my bike computer, I just wear it on my wrist. It's just a watch that I can see the power on my wrist. And the issue was when I put on that long sleeve jacket, it covered my watch.
Nice. So that could have played in your advantage then.
I think it did. And so at mile, I only looked at my watch once the entire bike, and I looked at it right around mile 95. And because at that point, the curiosity got the better of me. And I was going, man, I've been riding, a little bit sluggish, to be honest, is what I was thinking in my mind. And I've really kind of been holding off the gas and not really pushing it anywhere close to as hard as I could. And I look at my power, and it was 304 watts. And I thought it was going to be in the 260s. So then I went, oh, okay, I guess I'm riding pretty good.
Wow. So even comparing to what you did at Whistler, this is a substantial difference.
Oh, yeah, massive difference, yeah.
But did this feel harder than at Whistler or Mont Tremblant?
No, it felt about 25 or 30% easier, I would say.
Wow, but you were actually pushing harder.
Yeah.
So I think that actually equates to you actually being more fit.
Yeah, completely.
Wow. So whenever you actually look at the bike ride in hindsight, did you see a lot of flats, mechanicals, or anything like that?
I saw a few flats, nothing too crazy, but definitely a few flats out there. And mostly what I saw, to be honest, was tons of people having to get off the bike to pee.
Wow, did you have that issue?
Well, I didn't get off the bike to pee, but I had the issue of having to pee. I lost count. At the end, I was peeing every 12 minutes. That's how much I was having to pee. It was like, I think I took about 15 to 20 pees on that bike.
God. I mean, you're already wet. It doesn't really matter.
Doesn't really matter, yeah.
Man.
It actually felt, to be honest, it felt really good because pee is warm and you were cold, so.
Yes. God. So, a little bit, to get into the weeds a little bit on this, did you have any chafing post-race? Did you use any lube to prevent chafing? What does this look like?
Yeah, I always have some chafing after the race. I didn't have any lube. I almost always use lube. But in this particular instance, I didn't have a checked bag or anything, and it's over 3 ounces, so the lube couldn't be brought, so I just went without it.
That makes sense. Now, moving on a little bit to getting ready to get to T2, how does the last few miles of the bike ride go for you?
Yeah, the last 2 miles of the bike went well. I was kind of telling myself, don't really push too hard last few miles, just get your run legs. And I actually thought the whole group was going to catch me. That's the funny thing. I thought they were going to catch me because I was letting up on the gas so much. But I actually was still I was still putting time on them, even when I was letting up on the gas there at the end. So I was just riding really well on that particular day, and it was pretty cool. I had this big police escort I wasn't getting a draft. Let me be very clear about that. They were about a quarter mile ahead. There were 2 police cars with their sirens on, and there was a police truck behind me with the sirens on. So you felt kind of like the Queen of England or something, you know.
So did you have a clock right in front of you as well?
Well, they had a clock on the truck a quarter mile ahead, and so, I mean, I was just really, it was a lesson in long-sighted vision to try and read that clock the final 10 miles.
Yeah, you're not going to do that.
Because I couldn't see my watch. So I had no idea what my bike time was because my watch was covered up. So the only way I knew how long I had been racing for was to try and see the clock on the van a quarter mile ahead, which, that's how I did it.
So you get to T2, and this is, so for those that don't know it, this is about, what would you say, about a 400-meter run on concrete with your bike before you can hand it off to a volunteer and then actually go all the way down to get your bag to the tent, which is probably about another 200-meter run from the time you give your bike off to get to the changing tent to change to your running gear, right?
Yep, that's correct. And then it's basically another 200 after the tent from you've got your shoes on until you reach the timing mat that starts the marathon. So you're running, about 800 meters, a half mile there.
Yeah.
Uncounted in the distance.
Right. And then you also have some stairs here to go up as well.
Yeah, that's true. I had forgotten about those.
Yeah, so, and on the back side or on the other side of the changing tents, here it's sandy, really loose dirt almost, and it's kind of nasty on the backside with all the mud that they had there before you get to the stairs. Yeah,
completely.
Now, how was T2 and how did this go for you? You were in there 3:25.
Yeah, you'll have to check. I think I've got the fastest T2 time of anyone in the race. So
really,
I think so. You might have to double check that, but I mean, I checked the top 10 guys and I had the fastest time. So it went well.
Nice. So going out on the run, how did you actually prepare for this run, knowing that it's going to be a little bit different than a bike ride, but you don't want to shed too much too soon, but yet you want to stay warm enough to run well?
Yeah, I run really warm when I run, so which is usually an issue when I race in a hot weather race, which is why I wore that man bra that one time to stay cool. So I wasn't really worried about getting cold while I was physically running. I knew I would generate enough body heat to stay warm, and that comes from experience. I live in Colorado, and I've lived in Colorado my whole life, and I've gone on runs in shorts and a t-shirt when it's been 35 degrees out. So, which I don't recommend, but I've done it, and so I knew I'd be totally fine in the conditions, and that being cold wasn't going to be an issue on the run.
Wow. So as far as the run goes, did you have a strategy? This is, for those that don't know it, it's an out and back, and there's only about 100 or so feet of gain on this, and those are like small little pedestrian overpasses, right?
Yep, that's correct. My strategy was to not get caught, was essentially going to be my race strategy, and at this point, I still had, actually, that's incorrect. Right as I ran out of T2, people told me, like, you've got 9 minutes on the next guy. And I went, wow, that's massive. And my strategy was to have a really solid first half, which I worked with my likely soon-to-be coach, Ryan Bolton. And he told me, like, don't worry about, like, evenly pacing this run. Like, you want to start fast and make hay when the sun's shining, not literally because the sun wasn't shining, but figuratively. And so I started off at about 6:20 miles, and I ran that first 10 miles, I want to say.
Wow. So did Ryan give you kind of an idea of what he wanted you to do as far as execution?
Yeah, you mean for the whole run? The idea was basically, I think what he told me word for word almost was, you can run 6:20 to 6:30 mile pace aerobically, and you'll still be able to burn fat and not kick it into sugar metabolism. And don't run faster than 6:20 pace, as then that's going to, start depleting glycogen and all of those negative things when you're trying to run a marathon. And try and run 6:20 to 6:30 paces for as long as you can. And if you can do it the whole race, that's great. But no matter what, once you get to 30K, no matter how you're feeling, just make sure you're moving forward at all times.
Right. So the first out, whenever you go past Churchill Downs and then you get to the turnaround on the far end, what was this like? Because at this point you had people behind you, but you didn't really know where they were or if they were making up ground on you. What was this like?
Well, it was good because then once I make the turnaround, and then as I kept running, I could then see them. And what I did is I hit my watch, I hit my Timex, and I got the stop. I hit the lap button, and I saw second place, and the lap told me it was 4 minutes and 20 seconds, which tells me, you double that, 8 minutes. I still had 8 minutes and 40 seconds on second place, and I started with 9 minutes, so I went, or 9.5 minutes. So I went, okay, I've only lost 50 seconds, but that's over 1/4 of the run. So that means I'll only lose, 2.5 minutes over the course of this whole run, which that ended up not being true at all. But because I ended up getting past. But at that moment, I actually felt pretty good about this, and I was running well, and then I just sort of kept chugging along.
Right.
And the run course is pretty. You gotta. It was lonely out there, if I'm honest, man. Especially I think because of the conditions that a lot of the spectators who are often there were not there.
Right, because it was so nasty.
So nasty. I mean, I got almost no cheers until that first out and back. I mean, I could certainly no more than 5 people cheered me on the course of that first out and back. Not counting volunteers and stuff, but people out there just to cheer. There was no one.
I mean, I was volunteering and I was cold pretty much from 5:30 to about 10:30 that night, and it was just a nasty day to be out there, and it was hard. It really was.
Yeah, and so I think mentally it just made it so you really had to be even more focused and disciplined, and then on that reverse out and back, coming back from the out and back, I guess is how I should say it. So from mile 7 until 13, I definitely hit a few dark spots. That was probably, some really dark spots. I remember I said, because my girlfriend was out on the course, and she goes, "You're doing great." And I said to her, things are really starting to hurt. I'm not sure I can keep doing this. And she just went just keep going, just keep going. And I did. I kept going, and I never walked. But those hours there were, I was just completely in my head there, man, and just trying my best not to walk and not to get negative. And it was hard at those moments, but thankfully I think I made it through. And then, unfortunately within that time, I mean, my pace fell off I had a few miles there that were, I mean, still most people would consider them to be running well. I was running 7:20 pace, but at that time Chris Lieferman was running 5:45 pace. So for 4 miles, he's running a minute and a half faster than me. He took off 6 minutes there.
Wow. So how did you mentally get out of this negative rut or this dark spot?
Well, I kind of knew once I made it to the start of the second lap, I'd probably be better. And it was also, when I came into the special needs, I always put the same bottle I told you about that I put in Whistler. It's a bottle, it's got water, it's got a few calories, and then it's got 200 milligrams of caffeine and these other, it's a first endurance product called Pre-Race, and a serving of that, and I just downed that. And once that caffeine and everything else that's in that supplement hit me, my mind came back on track, and then I was pretty good to go. The other thing I did, which it sounds kind of weird, but this is actually good with Churchill Downs there, is if you think about a racehorse and the jockey, they're two separate things. They're two separate beings, yet they race as one, right? humans, when we race, like, we actually have two separate beings. Like, we're one being, but you can think about it as like your mind and your body. And I knew I needed to get my mind, which is the jockey, like, to control the body. And so I actually was like slapping myself on the face at times just to like try and wake myself up and come back to reality of like, oh, this is where I am. Cause like I'm getting hazy and like all of a sudden, like I'm seeing lights in the clouds and the road is blurry in front of me. And so I, just keep slapping myself in the face to bring me back to reality. And eventually it worked.
Wow. So how would you actually know from a physical or mental standpoint of if you're crossing that line of going too far physically and you're putting your health at risk? How would you know if you went too far?
That's a really good question, Terry. And to tell you the truth, I actually had a little bit of a scare since I've gotten back this week. I'm doing Xterra World Champs now. It's a week from Sunday, and so I came back to Louisville, and I went, I want to try and, maintain my fitness. And so I only took 2 days off, and then I started training again. And yesterday I did a run and then a swim, and then I was sitting in the sauna to do some heat adaptation. And it was crazy. I got out, and I was feeling pretty much totally fine. And then I stood up out of the sauna, and I was hot, and all of a sudden, like, I had the same thing at first. Like, my vision goes a little bit, I'm starting to see a little bit of stars, and then I completely blacked out, and I fainted, and I fell down.
Really?
Yeah, and people said I was out for about 30 or 45 seconds. And then I had to get up, and it took me 20 minutes to figure out like my bearings and everything. So that was pretty scary that something like that could happen to me. That was yesterday.
Oh, yesterday.
Yeah, that was yesterday. That day I hadn't pushed it anywhere close to as hard as I had pushed it in an Ironman, and it does make you realize when you're training and pushing your body to the limit, how do we actually know if you're at the limit? And unfortunately, it's usually the type of thing like you never think you're at the limit until you're past it, and then you go, oh, like holy, I was past the limit there, but you don't know it until you are, really. I mean, you can sense it when it's close, but like in that race, like if I had walked, I would have considered that a massive failure to myself. I would have been completely bummed about that, and I didn't, and I was fine on the day, but I'm sure I was pretty close to the limit there when I was having to, slap myself in the face and get myself to go, and then you get nutrition in, and then everything's fine, but you can get warning signs occasionally. I mean, if something's really going off, I think you need to give it time, and it's great. You always want to. My dream is to win an Ironman, and I want to go and win an Ironman, but I don't want to win an Ironman at the cost of my life. So
right.
That's pretty clear,
Right, and one of the things. So I had an athlete, Joanna, at this race, and one of the things that I had talked with her about before the race was, how will you know if you're putting your health at risk, and how would you know to actually pull the cord? And we had talked about this, and she said, uncontrollable shaking on the bike where I can't control where I'm going. And I said, okay. So that's your point, and if you get there, pull the plug, no judgment passed on yourself, you need to just pull the plug for your own health risk. So that's how she would know. And it didn't come to that point, but that way she would actually know, hey, I'm doing this for safety before she got to that point. So that way, if she did get there, she's not going to judge herself, because you could definitely do that, and that could be a whole other whirlwind of, wow, okay, now I'm feeling bad for myself because I went here and I didn't get to do the race I wanted to do. But if you put your health at first, you're not going to pass any judgment.
Right. Yep. Completely. And a failure's not necessarily a failure. Failure always has to be decided within the context that it was within, just as with achievement. You have to decide achievement within the context. And if you drop out of an Ironman because if you were to keep going, you were going to put your life in danger, anybody who calls that a failure, I think should go see a therapist.
Yes. So, you didn't get past on the run until, what, mile 18 or 19?
Yeah, I think it was 19 and a half.
Okay, so what was this like for you, knowing that you could potentially go to Kona if you start digging deeper, but you would have to actually dig really deep right now?
Well, I was already digging as deep as I could, I think, and the miles before, people had kind of told me, like, oh, it's down to, like, 2 minutes or 1 minute, like, so I kind of knew the pass was coming, and I was really getting myself mentally prepared to not give up when the pass came, and things got ugly after he passed me, man, because he passed me, and he actually, Chris Lieferman, he looks at me and he goes, dude, you are having a phenomenal race. You are crushing it. Way to go. And at that moment, like, I mean, I was just in the heat of battle. Like, I didn't even say, like, I feel bad about it now, but I didn't even say anything to him in return, because I was like, I was trying to kick it into gear to not have him drop me. And which he then continued to drop me, and I had 10K left. And, I pretty much just started grunting to myself and talking to myself to get myself to try and catch him, which I never did. But those final 10Ks, I mean, I gave it more than I really think I probably could even give before the race. And then, of course, afterwards, I made sure to make him understand that it's not that I had anything against him and that he had an awesome race as well. It was just that I was a little bit out of it at the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that just goes as far as class, I mean, whenever people think about pros in other sports, I mean, it's not really the same kind of class that you have in triathlon where people actually care about each other and they want everybody to have a good race, and whatever happens. They want the cars just to fall how they'll fall. And that's right. The same way here. It's like, hey, you're having a great race, keep it up. Like, that's just class, and that's real sportsmanship, Yeah,
nothing but class. And I mean, Chris Lieferman, brought the run to another level on that race course, and this sport's all about pushing new limits, and so major props to Chris for passing me and for showing me how it's done and giving me some motivation to improve for next time.
Wow. So whenever you get to miles 24 and 25, what was it like during these miles?
Oh, it was the same. It sucked, and I was just grunting it out. I was physically grunting it out. There's no doubt about that, and I was just thinking about getting to that finish line, and 100% sole focus. I was not thinking about anything else except for putting one foot in front of the other as fast as I possibly could.
Wow. So what was it like passing the sign that says to the finish rather than going to the second loop?
Oh, it was good, I suppose. To be honest, that didn't even really register in my mind. But now that you're telling it, I guess it was good that I didn't have to go do another loop.
Yeah. So whenever you get ready to go to the finish line, this is on 4th Street Live. There is basically, if people haven't been there, it's 2 floors of bars that kind of look down upon the 4th Street Live there. What was this experience like for you?
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah, it's one of the best finishing line shoots I think there is. I mean, it's packed and, it's just a totally lively atmosphere, especially after you come out from that rain. And I mean, I almost thought it's like being reborn again or something. It's amazing. Like, you come in and I mean, I couldn't even believe, first of all, I honestly couldn't even believe that I was in second place. And I couldn't believe that I was about to run a 2:55 marathon. And I mean, at that moment, all of a sudden I had enough energy for everything. And it was perfect. Yeah.
Wow. So if you could compare this to Mont Tremblant, Whistler, how would you rate this race?
As a whole?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it's up there. I think Mont Tremblant's probably my favorite. But this one's quite a good race too, and that's maybe clouded a little bit by the weather. And to be honest, I'd be more than happy to go back there next year or in the years in the future, because I think it's a cool area, and I think the hospitality is really amazing, and I think the course is quite fair on the bike, and I think the run is also, a fair course, and I really think it's a really good race venue.
Right. Now, how would you compare the finish line of Louisville to all the other races that you've done? Because I've heard that this finish line at Louisville is more electric than any other race course.
Yeah, I'd have to agree and say it was the most electric finish line I've ever had, but that might also be because I was in second place. I know, as a male pro, if you're top three, there's a lot more people there at the podium, down the finishing chute. While if you're even back to say sixth or seventh place, actually a lot of those people disperse already. It's kind of crazy. But it was crazy. Yeah, it was. I'll remember that forever.
Wow. So what was it like actually finishing second, man?
Oh, it's crazy. You put your life on the line almost. I mean, not literally, but like in the months that preceded it, like I actually got the most disciplined I've ever been in my life about training and not drinking beer, and I really lived monk mode for months for that race, and my friends would ask me to go out and they'd ask me to do things, and I'm 22, mind you, so people my age, we usually stay up a little bit late and have some fun, and I said no almost all the time, and it got to the point where people were like, wow, you're taking this to another level, like you're that serious about it right now, and some people asked me, is it worth it? And my only answer to them was, I'll know if it's worth it after the race. I won't know before. And it was 100% worth it. 100% worth it, because like I went into that race knowing that I had done everything I could to be as good as I was. And it's truthfully like really the only race I can say where like in the 2 months preceding it, like I basically did everything I could. And then on the race day, like I gave 100% of what I had to give, and it got second place. And if it had been third place or if it had been first place, I guess would be different things. First place would have been better, but even if I had been fifth place, I mean, I maybe would have gone, oh geez, I think I could have done better, but it was just an amazing feeling. And then coming in second gives me the confidence that in my future, like if I just get a few more little training principles right and just keep up the hard work, that a win is in the future. I'm pretty sure of that.
That's awesome. So what was it like being on the blocks this time and getting the champagne and the flowers up there, man?
Pretty awesome. It was pretty cold too. We had a full conversation up there, like, are we actually going to spray cold champagne on us after we've been getting rained on all day? And then we basically said we got to do it for the gram, and we did it.
Wow. So after you get done with the award ceremony, all that fun stuff, what did you get to do next, man?
I got to get drug tested.
So you went and gave blood?
Not blood. They just had they just took a urine sample, and that took forever. It took like 30 minutes. Because you got to fill out all these documents and forms and, bureaucracy. So it just took forever. And in that time, I got extremely cold. It was crazy how cold I got.
Really?
Well, yeah, I can't go put on my warm morning clothes bag because they don't give you enough time to do that. And, crazy cold. And then finally I dealt with that after 30 minutes. But, I was in bad shape by that point just because of how cold I was. So then I went and I sat in the medical tent, and I had them give me about 8 space blankets and these big hobo blankets, as I would call them. And
yes, those white blankets were everywhere on race day.
Yeah, I got these, and I just got as many as I could, and then I sat by a heater, and then finally I warmed up, and then you better believe I went and drank a glass of bourbon.
Awesome. So I know your girlfriend was there. What was it like whenever she actually met up with you finally at the finish line?
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah, so fun.
Man. So we covered quite a bit about the race. What else do you want to add about your race, man?
Oh, just that. Yeah, an Ironman is always a journey for everyone and anyone who does it, and all of our journeys are unique and individual, but that's what makes them powerful. You know, we have unique things of our journey and things that you should remember about who you are for the rest of your life, and those deep, dark places you learn about yourself in an Ironman. Bring those out in your life. Don't bring out the dark points, but learn how you can overcome those dark points and become a better human being. And then the other part of an Ironman is that you have those individual parts, but then we're all a massive community. Everyone who was out there, we all will remember that day for the rest of our lives. Like, that was one hell of a shitty day. And we persevered, and we've got that in common. And you know, that makes us a community and people you can reach out to. And so I guess that's all I'd say.
Wow. So to kind of wrap everything up here, what's next for you, man? I know it's kind of the end of the season, unless you travel down south somewhere. So what's next?
Yeah, I just got one more race. I'm doing Xterra World Champs a week from Sunday.
Wow.
October 28th, yeah.
So what is that about? I know that's over in Maui, right?
Yeah, it's in Maui, and so it's off-road. So it's a 1,500-meter swim in the ocean, and then it's a 40K, I want to say 40K mountain bike ride. Real hilly, you know, on single-track trails, muddy, pretty crazy. You got to be tough to do it. And then it's a 10.5K trail run, and that's got like 1,200 or 1,400 feet of elevation gain.
God.
Yeah, it's a pretty serious ordeal. For all said and done, for me, it'll take about 2.5 hours, but that's full gas the entire time.
Man. So to get over there, you're gonna have to fly, obviously, and you got to take a bike over there. Is your girlfriend going too?
She's going.
Wow. So y'all get to have a little vacation afterwards.
Exactly, a little romantic vacation.
So are you going to head over to Kona and see where the other race took place?
No, I don't think so. I don't think I'll have time.
Okay. Man. So what about next year? What all races did you have on your list for next year?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll certainly be doing St. George, 70.3 St. George. I love that race. And the plans actually, I've done 5 Ironmans this year. Next year I'll probably be doing 3 Ironmans, and I won't be doing Ironmans until the middle of summer. So I'll wait and really build fitness and focus on some fundamentals. And then I'd kind of like to do Ironman Lake Placid and then Ironman Wisconsin, and then hopefully be qualified for Ironman Kona.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a good plan, man.
Yeah, so that's that, and that's not, you know, that's not set in stone yet, but that's kind of what I'm working on. It sounds epic to me, and I love all those races, and so I think that's what I'll do.
Wow. Have you done Lake Placid before?
No. Nope.
Gosh. Well, I interviewed, I think, 9 or 10 people from there this year, so if you want to know about that race, just let me know. It's pretty easy.
Perfect.
I was there last year as a volunteer. I get around volunteering. It's pretty fun.
Yeah.
So, if people want to follow you, how can they follow you, man?
The best way, I'm most active on Instagram, and my account name's just Sam Go Long, and all my other feeds are on Facebook. I'm just Sam Long. My website's Sam Go Long. Twitter's Sam Go Long. So pretty much Sam Go Long, and I kind of like how it sounds, and it should be easy enough to remember. But yeah, Instagram's the main one.
Okay, cool. So being that we all get everything wrapped up, and I've already asked you what your definition of a perfect race is, we'll kind of mix things up this time with, if you could put this in order of importance for you, what would you say is most important? Mental grit, nutrition, or fitness?
That's a good question. Holy cow. Mental grit, 100%.
Okay, so that's number 1.
Oh, I got to do all 3.
Yes.
Nutrition and then fitness.
Really? So why put these in that order?
Well, again, I think you've got to have all 3, but what I will tell you is that I finished my first Ironman in 9 hours and 27 minutes. that was when I was an age grouper, and I was 18 years old, and I think the only reason that was maybe the race I've gotten the most out of myself for how fit I was, and it was because I was so mentally determined to cross that finish line, and absolutely nothing could stop me. And if you're mentally fit, mental grit, you always finish the race, and you can be the fittest person in the world, but if you don't have mental grit, you probably won't finish a lot of your races, because there's always going to be some moment that gets really, really hard. And then I put nutrition in second, even before fitness. I mean, because even if you're, again, say the most fit person in the world, and say you tried to take in 0 calories for an Ironman, you'd probably still finish. I could probably do an Ironman with no calories, but I'd probably finish in 16 hours. And so then how does it really matter how fit I am, right? Since I just did, 740. So the nutrition's got to come before the fitness, and the mental grit's got to come before the fitness. And really both of those things are what allow your fitness to shine, is how I would say it. So if you're really fit and then you nail your nutrition and you're mentally tough, that's how you have a really good day.
Awesome. Well, Sam, it's been so much fun hanging out with you again. I've enjoyed it. So I want to actually mix things up a little bit, being that this is your second time and I'm getting a little bit more comfortable on the show. Let's talk a little bit about what you want to know from me. What can I give value to the audience that's listening?
Well, I want to ask you, from everyone you've talked to, what do you think is the best Ironman out there?
Wow. Okay, so this is going to be episode 180 something, more than likely. Personally, I would actually say Mont Blanc. If I had to go and sign up for any race based on just the logistics, based on how much the race director cared about the athletes, I would definitely say Mont Blanc. I actually talked with the race director on the phone after I did the series of Mont Blanc and gave him some ideas for his race, and he not only listened to my voice, but he also asked me to send him an email, and then he followed up with me. So showing the dedication to not only learn about it, but to actually follow up and say, hey, here's what we're going to do in the future for X, Y, and Z. That shows that he cares about the details, because I interviewed Cody Bills, who was first, and then I also interviewed everybody in between that. And it was really, really good, of a good mix, and he really showed that he cared about the race.
Yeah, I mean, of all the Ironmans I've done so far, that's my favorite. So I think that's a pretty good answer there.
Yeah. So what else, man?
Well, of the bike and the run, do you think it's better to have a more conservative bike and really set yourself up for a faster run, or to, really go for it on the bike and then see if your run legs come? And which one do you think is mentally harder?
I would definitely say the run is more mentally hard, but I think playing to your strengths on the bike ride is also key, because if the course is flat, you're going to be on the pedals the whole time, but if that's not your strength, that's not your strength, so that could play for a detrimental run. But if your strength is hills, like Whistler, Lake Placid, or Chattanooga, well, going all out on the bike ride, you're actually going to be more fresh on the run. But the run also needs to be in your favor of what you trained on. So if you didn't train on hills, well, Chattanooga isn't going to be your favorite race, because there's a lot of hills on the backside there. So it just depends on what you train for versus what your strengths are. That doesn't really answer your question, but I feel like that would be really how to play it best for you as an individual, because every person has strengths that they're naturally good at doing, and knowing the course before you actually register for it is going to be the best option.
Yeah, totally. I agree. I kind of asked you that it was a trick question in a way to see if I could get you trapped.
Well, hopefully I didn't get too trapped in it. I know somebody's going to criticize, but whatever. So, what else, man?
I guess the other question I want to ask is, do you have any secrets for getting to sleep a little earlier the night before?
So the trick is, honestly, after all these interviews so far, is actually getting to sleep the night before the night before. That night is the most critical for sleep. The night before the race, there's only a handful of people that don't really sleep, or that do sleep good, but for the most part, nobody sleeps good that race, or that night before the race.
Yeah, that's what I've always thought.
Everybody has those nervous energy, and I've even had pros and age groupers say, if I wasn't nervous and I wasn't feeling anxiety about it, maybe it's time for me to not do this anymore, because that's why I do this. And
right.
That just makes so much sense, because it shows that you care about what's going to happen. So,
yeah.
I mean, if you don't care, why don't you do it in the first place? So, I can see that.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good answer.
Yeah. Well, hey, man, we'll go ahead and wrap up here. If you have any questions afterwards, just let me know. And it was fun catching up and kind of opening up a little bit to myself. I plan on doing that a little bit more in the future.
Perfect. Yeah, great, Terry.
Yeah, it's fun, man. So if you have any questions, let me know, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Sounds good.